He was so kind and caring. It seemed like he was doing really well for himself. You were hanging out on the 7th floor, right? I felt like my little legs were swinging in the air, like they had nothing underneath. You were talking about this issue, and depending on how much money he had, he might have died. You know, someone might have already gone through this to depend financially on a man. Mara went through this, and it was really hard. But it didn't have to be that way. He was a very kind and generous person. I worked in a mall in the capital, and here I lived in a Lagos. I was on the 7th floor, and you were on the issue of his money. Depending on how much money a man has, you know, someone might depend on him financially. Mara went through this, and it was bad, but it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be so bad that today, love, music. Mara, how old are you? I'm 42. I lived a soap opera scene, right? A bad soap opera scene. Yes, it is a very bizarre case. So, ready is the following. I had a relationship with the gaucho and us. We met in 2001. I was 20 years old. It wasn't tall, just like these gauchos that we imagine. It was short. Mara, you're alive because of a spirit. Exactly, a spirit saved her life. You'll understand. How old are you? 42. I lived a soap opera scene, a bad soap opera scene. Yes, it's a very bizarre case. So, ready. I had a relationship with the gaucho and us. We met in 2001. I was 20 years old. He wasn't tall, just like these gauchos we imagine. He was short, but he had a blonde, honey-colored eyes, a gaucho pattern. He wasn't this whole beauty, but he was cute. Yes, it wasn't Rodrigo Hilbert, right? No, no. He was Rodrigo Hilbert in a smaller size, with more purple, thin hair, but the hair was very similar, so he was only a little larger than Rodrigo. Anyway, we met in 2001. I worked in a mall in the capital. I lived in a Lagos, and then I worked in, well, he was a very handsome man with blonde, honey-colored eyes and a kind face. He had a gaucho pattern, but it wasn't the whole beauty. He was cute, but he wasn't Rodrigo Hilbert. He was Rodrigo Hilbert in smaller size, with more purple hair, but the hair was very similar, so he was only a little larger than Rodrigo. Anyway, we met in 2001. I worked in a mall in the capital at the time, in the shopping Iguatemi. There was a coffee shop in the middle of the mall, and he spent 2 months watching me. The girl from the coffee shop said, Mara, he has an admirer. He is not from here. He is from the south, and he comes to watch you every day. He comes here to have coffee and stay just admiring you. It was in the capital, in the shopping Iguatemi. There was a coffee kiosk right in front of the store where I worked. For 2 months, this guy watched me. The girl who worked there said that Mara had an admirer. He was from the south, and he came to watch her every day. He came to have coffee and admire her. I didn't know who he was, but I kept watching him. I had a flight, and it was for 2 months. But you know, that's how it goes, right? I was 20 years old, and everything was an adventure. I admired him, and during these 2 months, he went from just watching me to sending me candy boxes and foster cards. Then, one beautiful night, I dropped it. It was just beginning, 2 months ago. I don't know who he was, but he was there in the coffee. I asked her not to say that he was there, but I couldn't help but keep watching. I had a flight, and it was for 2 months, but you know how it is. I was 20 years old, and it was like an adventure. I had been admiring this person for a while, and then he started sending me candy boxes. One night, it was 10 o'clock, and he approached me. I saw the tip of the car, a red BMW. Imagine this way, you know that thing. Call him, he made a scene with him. It was all exaggerated, like that scene where he crossed the car in mine, a red convertible BMW. I was like, who is crazy, right? But what a beautiful car, right? And then he said my name, hi, so-and-so. I said, it's. At 10 o'clock at night, he approached me right as I saw the red BMW. You know how it is when you first see someone, and then they make a scene. He made a scene with him, and it was all exaggerated. He crossed the car in front of my red convertible, and then, wow. I was like, who is crazy right now? But he was so handsome. And then he said my name. Hi, so-and-so, I said. It's, so I imagine you are Dava, being or the secret admirer there. He did. Yes, I am. I decided to introduce myself to you today. I did, and I needed to be here in the parking lot in the dark. He finally started talking in a way that gave me confidence. Then he invited me to dinner, and I went. I was crazy. I entered his car without knowing right away, but it had been watching me for 2 months. He had already known me as the girl who liked coffee. I felt. I'm so glad you're here, Dava being. I'm the secret admirer. Yes, I am. I decided to introduce myself to you today, and I needed to be here in the parking lot at night. He finally started talking in a way that made me feel confident, and then he invited me to dinner. I went to crazy, and I entered his car without knowing right away, but he had been watching me for 2 months. He had already known me as the girl who always had coffee there. I felt insecure, and she said he lived in Maceo and was a businessman, so I thought it wouldn't do anything to me, because he had a name, Avila. There is nothing to blame for this. At 20, we don't think about things right. Yes, it is true that we don't think all adventures are welcome in the city. People like to play there. We had dinner at a chic restaurant, and he finally left me at the gate of my. I was a little insecure at first, because she said he lived in Maceo and was a businessman, but I thought, hey, he's got a name, Avila. At 20, we don't always think things through. It's true, we don't think all adventures are welcome in the city. People like to play there. We had dinner at a chic restaurant, and he finally left me at the gate of my place, which was a tiny apartment. I didn't let him in, and it was a bit much for him. He didn't want to climb, but every night after that first night, he took me home. We kissed on the first night, and then we met. He started taking me every night, because it was dangerous. Even an 8-10-minute walk was dangerous. I was living in a small apartment in Maceo with my cat, and I didn't want him to go up there with me. He didn't want to climb, but every night, I'd take him home. Then, on that first night, we kissed. We met, and he started coming every night. It was dangerous, and I'd walk home in 8 to 10 minutes, which was very dangerous. Because of the energy rationing of the time, I felt safer with him. Then, we started meeting every night, and he took me to lunch a lot and pampered me. He seemed to have a very good financial condition, and I ended the relationship engagement. It was 4 months when I met this gaucho, and a month after that, I ended the engagement, because my groom left for another state. We started getting to know each other better, and we ended up like, we were still dating in June, and by December, he was already telling me, I'm setting up a business in the south with my brother, and I'll have to go back. I want you to go with me. I told him, I'm not going with you to the south. So, we spent 6 months in Maceo, in the capital, dating. But then he left, and we dated for a while, and by the time June rolled around, we were talking about setting up a business together in the south. He was telling me, I'm going back to the south with my brother to start a business, and I want you to come with me. I told him, no way am I going to the south. So, we spent 6 months in Maceo, right in the capital, and we dated. But then he left, and I finished by the time February 2002 hit. The next year, he left in December 2020. In February 2002, he called me. I said, "Oh, I'm going there tomorrow. I'll pick you up. I can't take it anymore without you here." He said, "But I'll quit my job and everything." I knew what he was talking about. He didn't study there. I finished it in February 2002. By December 2020, he had left, and in February 2002, he called me. I said, "Oh, I'm going there tomorrow. I'll pick you up. I can't take it anymore without you here. I'll leave my job." He said, "But I will leave my job. I know what there is. I didn't study at college, not at the time. I went to high school, not college, and I didn't study. I'm not going to college. I'll look for you in the south, in an interior city in the mountain gaucho. And then you can study here. I'll ride a store for you. You can ask for a resignation from your work. I'll set up a store here for you that you want. I already have clothes, since you work with fashion, can be clothes, and so on." I had just finished high school, and I didn't go to college or anything like that. I said, "Not since you're not studying. I'm not going to college. I'll look for you to study here, in the south, right in an interior city in the mountains." And then I said, "I'll ride a store for you. You can ask for your job back. I'll set up a store here for you that you want. I already have clothes, since you work with fashion. It could be a laundry store, and it would be great." It was very young, like such a damn humble family. I'll try to give up my life right, and so it was always very cool with me. I confess to you that I didn't love him, but he was really cool to me. So I had confidence in him. I felt well with him. I felt safe, and then I thought, love comes with time. In these 6 months that you stayed together, what did you know about? I was so happy when I found the perfect lingerie for you, and it made my day. He was such a kind and humble family man. I tried to be the best person I could be in my life, and he was always so nice to me. I didn't love him at first, but he was really nice to me, so I had confidence in him. I felt safe and well with him. In these 6 months that you two were together, what did you know about him? What did he do in life? He had a company. I sold cars, and I knew about his family. I had already spoken with 2 people from his family on the phone, and knew he had children at the time. His son was 2 years old. I knew his son. I lived with his son. He knew his ex-wife. He got along with his ex-wife. I didn't know either of them very well, because we didn't socialize much. It was a lot. He did everything in his power to make me happy. He was a businessman who sold cars, and I knew about his family. I had already spoken with 2 of his relatives on the phone, and I knew he had children at the time. His son was 2 years old, and I lived with his son. He was friendly with his ex-wife, and he was a good person. I didn't know either of them very well, but I was happy to talk to me. I saw him and greeted me when he gave his son to me to spend the weekend. But Ruffs, you believe he took a plane, came to Lagos, and knocked on my door. I was scared, and he was there with me. And that is not for me. The young man was practically a teenager. I said, "Wow, he loves me. I love him." I thought all this was right as he is. I was so happy to see him, and he greeted me warmly. He said he'd come to spend the weekend with my son, and I was so grateful. He took a plane to Lagos, and when he knocked on my door, I was so surprised. I was still pretty young, just a teenager, and he was practically a grown man. I thought, wow, he really loves me. He was so willing to do anything for me. I thought, this man really loves me, so I decided to talk to my family. My family lives in the interior, where I currently live, and he said, let's talk to your parents. I'll go there with him. He already knew my parents because, remember, we'd spent 6 months dating. I worked in the capital, and sometimes would come to visit my parents in the countryside. He said he'd talk to my parents, so I went with him. My parents were in shock, but they welcomed me with open arms. They said, my God, Heaven, your daughter is so new, with 21 years, 20 years, and you will leave us. Go there for that place you don't. There will be no one there in the family. I knew what cell phones were like at the time, but they weren't as advanced as today's technology. I already had a cell phone, but it wasn't as sophisticated as the ones today. He came to visit my parents, and my mother was in shock. She said, my God, Heaven, my daughter, you are so new, with 21 years, 20 years, and you will leave us. Go there for that place you don't. There will be no one there in the family. I know what cell phones were like at the time, but it wasn't like today. I already had a cell phone, but it wasn't like today's, which has a video call. I said no, but I was determined to go there. I talked to my private mother. I said, I will give you a better life. He was very great. I had already talked to several people in the family, so I went there. Although I organized myself, I left less than a week later. I arranged my suitcase and left with him, ready to go. I arrived in Rio Grande do Sul. I went to live in the house of I had a video call, and I said, no, but I'm determined to go there and talk to my private mother. I said, look, I'll give you a better life. He has a very great family. I've already talked to several people in the family, and I'm going there. I organized myself, and I left with him less than a week later. I arranged my suitcase and left with him. I arrived in Rio Grande do Sul, and went to live in the house of his older sister, who was a house on the first floor. There were 2 houses, and the house below stayed for us and his family. Everyone hugged me, and I felt so loved. The nieces and nephews, uncles, his mother, and sisters all knew that the very big Gaucho family is very Sunday churbas, barbecue, and mate. I confess that I passed there after 4 months. I had a wonderful time with his sister, who was like a princess to me. I was still receiving unemployment insurance and had a bank account, so I didn't need to move, because he gave me everything I needed. I didn't need to worry about my unemployment insurance, or my drink, and I was completely financially independent from him. He had set everything up for me. I had a lovely 4 months of being a princess. I was still receiving unemployment insurance, and had some savings in the bank. I didn't need to move, because he gave me everything I needed. I didn't need to worry about my unemployment insurance, or my drink, and I was completely financially independent of him. In December 2000, he went to set up a metallurgical company with my brother. I found out when he came to pick me up. I met the metallurgist working there a few times. They fought a lot and ended up selling their equipment and machinery after 4 months of being together. He said he would go back. He went to set up a metallurgical business with my brother in December 2000, but it didn't work out. I found out when I went to pick him up, and he was working there. I met him a few times, and he and my brother fought a lot. After 4 months, they decided to sell their metallurgical machinery, and ended up back in Maceo. We decided to go back to Alagos, but he didn't even set up anything for me, because his business was still in the works. He couldn't set up a business for me, so we decided to look for an apartment and move to Maceo. A few months later, he started acting strangely and showing a lot of jealousy. I showed him before we had lunch or dinner in places. We went back to Alagos, and then to Maceo. He didn't set up anything for me, because his business was in the beginning. It didn't work out, so he couldn't set up a business for me. We looked for an apartment and went to live in Maceo. A few months passed, maybe 2 or 3 months, and he started acting strangely. He was jealous. He wouldn't leave me alone, even when we were eating. He wouldn't look at me or look at the sides. If I looked, he would say that I was flirting with someone. It was so absurd. He didn't leave me alone. He sent my clothes to where I was going, whether I wanted them or not. I started living as a prey. I only went out if it was with him. I couldn't go to the mall alone. You were in this situation, and it depended on his money. He didn't want me to raise my head or look at the sides because, if I did, he would say that I was flirting with someone else. It was so absurd, his jealousy, that he didn't want me to dress in a way that made me look attractive. I started living as a prey, right? I only went out if it was with him. I couldn't go to the mall alone, and you were in this situation, depending on his money. In the meantime, when we returned to Lagos a few months later, I received a letter from the government about a contest that I had entered. The letter said that I had to go to the contest right away. Then, the government letter arrived, saying that I had to take over at a school in the capital. I started working, and I wasn't very happy here without working. This situation started to bother me a lot because of his jealousy. They got very nervous. He started having some attacks of this fury at home. He started throwing things, like broken glass, when I questioned him. He would shout that I was crazy, and that I was going crazy. He even had him visit my parents, too. He had to send me as his driver of confidence, or to bring me, because he didn't even let me get a van or bus to come from the municipal internal right. So, I always depended on him, because he was very obsessive. He started to feel very anxious, and his mood would shift suddenly. At times, he would break a glass when I asked him about his feelings. He would shout that I was crazy, and that I was going crazy. He even had to send me to visit my parents, too. He didn't even let me get a bus or van to go with him. I always depended on him, because he was very obsessive. Then, his aggressive behaviors started to increase in strength until one day, when we were living in the same apartment, he got very upset. We went to live in a very nice neighborhood in the capital, and in this same street, there lived a very nice aunt, not a friend of my mother, but someone I also consider an aunt. She saw me grow up, and she lived in the same street that we went to live in. There was no building, and we didn't. I was really struggling at the time. I had these aggressive behaviors that made me feel strong, but then one day, we moved into a new apartment. We lived in a really nice neighborhood in the capital, and my aunt, who wasn't actually a friend of my mother, lived in the same street. She saw me grow up, and she lived in the same building that we moved into. It wasn't a fancy building, but it was nice. My aunt lived in a 3-story building, which was more simple, but we lived in the same street. Then, one day, I woke up and felt like I was rebelling. I thought, what will he do? He'll send me to live with someone else. So, I called a friend of mine who lived. I'm not one to gossip, but I'll tell you what happened. My friend lived in a 3-story building, and I lived in a much simpler one. We were in the same building, but we lived on different floors. One day, I woke up and felt like doing something different. I called my friend, who lived in a flat very close to mine. We decided to take a pool bath together in her building. This friend of mine sometimes came to my house. She was one of the only people who ever came to visit me, and I was happy to have her there. But I wasn't allowed to go out alone with her. That day, I decided to take a shower. I called her, and she was also off, so she came over. Let's take a bath together, I said. I had a really nice time at the pool with my friend. We had a great time, and I decided to take a bath. I went to my friend's apartment, and she was there. We had a great time together. I decided to take a bath, and I called her. She was also there, and she came over. We had a great time together. I didn't want to bother him before, but I didn't warn him. I spent the morning with her, and I took a bath. When I got home, my phone was already on. There were millions of calls, and he was already waiting for me. He started to get angry, and he got really upset. You know all that his name below that. I also spoke badly about my friend, saying that she was. I decided not to warn him beforehand. I spent the morning with her, and I took a bath. When I got home, my phone had already been on millions of times. There were millions of calls, and he was already waiting for me. Then, he started to get angry. He even got up and started to get angry. You know, he started to say bad things about my friend, saying that she was a bad person. So, I started to say bad things about my friend, saying that she was a bad person. She always speaks in a very decent way. Then, he really hit me that day. He needed to work. After he hit me, he took the key and said, "From today, you no longer have the key. You will only go out with me or when I send." Then, he locked me in. I was in a real private house. He left, locked everything, and said, "I will work," and then took my cell phone too. Okay. She started to defame my friend from anywhere you can imagine. She always speaks a very decent person, and then he really hit me that day. He needed to work after he hit me, and he said, "From today, you no longer have the key. You will only go out with me, or when I send you." Then he locked me there. I was in a real private house, right? He left, locked everything, and said, "I will work," and he took my cell phone, too. I had no way to get in touch with anyone. I stayed there right in my tower, isolated, crystal clear, without a key, without being able to leave, without a cell phone, without anything. He arrived at night, and when I arrived, I was lying in my room. He was calmer and took a shower. I was still so nervous to see him, and when I saw him, I was very afraid. We lived on the 7th floor, and then I took advantage of the fact that he went to take a bath when he turned. He took my phone with him, leaving me completely alone. I stayed in my tower, isolated and without a key, unable to leave without my phone. There was nothing there. When he arrived, it was already night. I was lying in my room, and he took a shower. I was still nervous to see him, but I was very afraid. We lived on the 7th floor, and I took advantage of the time he was in the shower to take the key and run out. I couldn't imagine passing that night with him sleeping in the same bed. Instead of taking the elevator, which I thought would take time to rise, I went to the emergency staircase. I hurried to the shower, eager to get clean. I took the key and ran out, eager to get away. I couldn't imagine spending that night with him sleeping in the same bed. I ran out, eager to be free. I didn't want to take the elevator, as I thought it would take time to rise. So, I went to the emergency staircase. It was one of those sensor staircases that only lights up when someone is on it. I had never gone on the emergency stairs before. I didn't know about the handrail, and the handrail of the emergency ladder of this building was very open. It was like an elephant could fall down there. When I opened the door, I entered so fast on the stairs, and the sensor didn't light up. I went down a total pitch. The sensor only lit up when I was right on top of it, and it only lit up when I was on the stairs. I never went down the emergency stairs before, so I didn't know about the handrail and the emergency ladder. I guess it was like an elephant's path. When I opened the door and went down the stairs, the sensor didn't light up. I slipped on the stairs and almost fell, but I held on to the railing. I felt like I was falling, and then I felt myself caught on the railing. I held on tight, but I was hanging low. The light didn't light up, and it was totally dark. I was hanging with my hand, and I quickly grabbed the other hand to hold on. I had a total loss of vision, and then I slipped on the stairs. I stumbled, and I held on to the railing. I felt like I was falling, and then I held myself. I felt like I was hanging, and I held on to the railing. But I was hanging low, and I was in total darkness. I was hanging with just one hand, and I quickly managed to hold on with the other. I was hanging. How many floors below? I was on the 7th floor. That was how I opened the door from the emergency stairs. We lived on the 7th floor. It was about 20 meters high, 20 to 22 meters. You were hanging, and your hand let go. You fell down. I felt my little legs swinging in the air. I had nothing underneath me. I hung with both hands in the dark, and the ladder sensor light didn't light up. The midfielder didn't light up at that time. I was on the 7th floor when I opened the door from the emergency stairs. It was about 20 meters high, which felt like a lot. I hung there, my little legs swinging in the air, like they had nothing underneath. I grabbed the handrail with both hands, and the ladder sensor light didn't come on. It was like a blackout. I thought of second fractions in my mind, and I thought, my God, I'm going to die. I just thought, I'm going to die, and then I felt something taking hold of my legs and lifting me up. I felt my legs being pushed from the bottom up, and then I went there. I felt a little force, and I managed to put my knee on top of the stairs. I felt a force, even as if I had this feeling like something was taking over my body. It was like I was being lifted up and down like in an elevator, but I couldn't see anything. It was as if someone was holding me up in the air, almost like they were helping me stand up. That's when I felt my knee come back onto the stairs. I felt my knees and my whole body, and I was like, wow, I can move. Then, I went to the corner of the wall. I dragged myself there, and the light came on. I was still shaking, and I thought, what just happened? I was amazed by the invisible elevator, as if guided by a guardian angel. I felt like I was suspended in time, as if someone had raised me to be this way. I felt my knee on the stairs, and then I felt it back on the wall. I dragged myself to the corner, where the light was blinding. I was trembling with the effort of breathing. I stayed there for a few minutes, looking at the space where I was, trying to understand what had happened. I thought I had to go down, because he would come after me. But before I could, I decided to look at what had happened. I put my head in the railing and looked down. I saw that that vacuum, that nothing, and I was hanging there, breathing heavily, and looking at the space where I was when I thought I had to go down, because he would come after me. But before I could, I decided to look at what had happened. I put my head in the railing and looked down, and I saw that I was going to fall from such a height, that there was no way to escape. There was no way a person falls from 20 or 22 meters, without having nothing to protect them from the fall. I was amazed, but at the same time, I was grateful, because it was a supernatural strength. I believe I felt that I was already losing. I saw that I was about to fall from such a great height, that there was no way to stop myself. I thought, there's no way a person can fall from 20 or 22 meters without hitting something first. I was amazed, but at the same time, I was grateful, because it was like he had supernatural strength. I remember feeling like I was losing strength in my arms. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. In a flash of seconds, I thought I would find only my body extended down below tomorrow. I knew I was hanging, and I knew that below there was nothing but air. When I was hanging, I didn't even think about it. I didn't even remember his existence. I didn't think about it until I sat on the stairs, leaning against the corner of the wall. I was thinking, this is it, I'm going to die. I only thought about it when I was sitting on the stairs, leaning against the corner of the wall. I thought, I'll have to keep going down to ask for help, because he will come after me. I remembered him, and that's it. I managed to go down a few more flights of stairs, and decided to knock on the first door I saw in the apartment of a young couple. I asked for help right through their house. I called my family. I also called my aunt, who lived on the same street. With a gentle breath, I thought, I'll have to keep going down to ask for help, because he will come after me. It was there when I remembered him, and that's it. I managed to go down a few more flights of stairs, and decided to knock on the first door I saw in the apartment of a young couple I didn't know. I asked for help right through their house. I called my family, including my aunt, who also lived on the same street. She went to the apartment where I lived and went to talk to him. She said, "Look, Mara. Okay, hold her." She told me what happened. You hit her. She got a lot scared and fled. She has a lot of fear of you. She wants to tell you that tomorrow, her family is coming to get her, and I want you to be aware of that. If you go after her, we will call the police and such. Finally, she finished. He still finished. My family went to pick me up right away. She went to the apartment where I lived and came to talk to him. She said, "Look, Mara. Okay, hold." She told me what happened. You hit her, and she got really scared and ran away. She's really scared of you. She wants you to know that her family is coming to get her tomorrow, and I want you to be aware of that. If you go after her, we'll call the police. Finally, she summed it all up. He still finished. My family went to pick me up the other day. I'd just arrived at my apartment, which I lived in with him and my family. I was very afraid of him. He was kind of crying, saying that he loved me, that it would never happen again, that he was just confused, that I didn't need to leave, and that he asked for the love of God, that he would only take me to my parents' house, that he was going to change and that he was going to improve. The other day, I arrived home to my apartment, where I lived with my family. I was a little scared of him, so he came over and gave me a big hug. He was crying and saying how much he loved me, and that he'd never do that again. He said he was sorry, and that he only lost his head, and didn't need to leave. He asked me to forgive him, said he only loved his parents, and that he was going to change and improve. He said he wanted to be with me again, and he tried to come back to me many times. He even gave me a car as a gift. I'd get to my parents' house with the wrapped car, and he'd say, "I bought this car for you. Let's go back to me. Take it to the apartment, and I'll bring flowers. Then, we can go back to your parents' house." He tried to win me back. He tried so many times to win me back. He gave me so many gifts, and he cried so many times with me. He even tried to win me back with the little boy from his past. He sent me flowers at work and gifts, and I didn't want him, but he didn't give up. One day, he caught me at the bus stop. He already knew the places I attended, and he called me to his car. I was so happy to receive the gifts, and I was so grateful that he was there with me. I miss him so much. He sent me flowers at work and other gifts, and I didn't want him to, but I couldn't resist. One day, he caught up with me at the bus stop. He already knew the places I went to, and he called me to his car. He said, "If you don't come back to me, I'll kill myself," and then he got a folder. He opened it and had inside of it. I did all that work right, psychological, saying that he didn't need to do this. I was also very afraid, because he could kill me. After a lot of fighting, he stopped and left for another city, leaving for Recife. In 2016, I was as I had been. He said, "If you don't come back to me, I'll kill myself." Then he got a folder and opened it. Inside, there was a 007 folder. I did all that work, right? I said that I didn't need to do this. I was very scared because he could kill me. After a lot of fighting, he stopped and left for another city, leaving Recife. In 2016, I called him and asked to meet him at my old college, because I needed to forgive him personally, and put an end to those nightmares I had with him. I dreamed of him hanging me, running after me, hanging on the stairs. I kept that terror at night, and it was very good because he went there. He already had a girlfriend, but then he cried. I had a lot of bad dreams about him. I called him and asked to meet him at my old college, because I needed to apologize to him personally. I needed to end those bad dreams. I dreamed that he was hanging me, that he was running after me, and that he was hanging on the stairs. I dreamed that I kept that terror at night, and it was very good because he went there. He already had a girlfriend, but then he cried a lot when he saw me and asked me for a lot of forgiveness. He said that he would never again like someone else as he liked me. He realized that he was very attracted to me and that he was a monster. He said that if I would never forgive him, he would die, and he would never forgive what he did to me. Anyway, I forgave him and stopped having bad dreams about him. This was in 2016, and then when it was in 20 when I saw him, he asked me for forgiveness. He said he would never do it again. He said he was in love with me, and he knew I was in love with him. He said he was a monster, and he knew he was very dangerous. He said that if I didn't forgive him, he would die. I said I would never forgive him for what he did to me. But I forgave him, and I stopped having bad dreams about him. This was in 2016. Then, in 2018, his wife called me. She said he had died in a car accident in Recife. He had been at a party, drinking alcohol. He never had control when he drank. He would always drink a lot, and then he would drive. It was very sad. But it was good that he died like this. He was 2 years old. Before I had forgiven him, he had one conversation face-to-face with me. We passed 10 years without seeing each other. After 10 years, in 2016, we had this conversation, and he cried. He asked me for forgiveness, and in 2018, at 42, he died. After that, how long did it take for you to come back inland to live with your parents? You managed to get back, because you were already there. Before I had the chance to forgive him, we had a heart-to-heart conversation. We had a rough 10 years, but we made it through. In 2016, we had this conversation, and he cried. He asked me for forgiveness, and in 2018, at the age of 42, he passed away. After that, you came back to live with your parents. You were able to come back, because you were already working. This is all when it happened. I was hanging out on the stairs. I was working, and my parents were there to support me. My aunt, who lived on the same street as me, helped me out during the week. My work was in the capital, and my parents lived in the interior, so I spent the week at her house. I'd go to work and then go back to her house. On Fridays, after work, I'd come home and spend the weekend with my parents. I was working hard at the time. My parents were there for me, and my aunt, who lived nearby, was also a huge support. I worked in the capital during the week, and my parents lived in the interior, so I'd spend the week at her house, work, and then go back to them. I'd come back on Friday, and I spent the weekend at my parents' house. On Monday, I'd come back to work early. I worked in the afternoon, then I'd take a bus to the capital, go straight to work, and then to my aunt's house. Thankfully, I always recovered quickly from this trauma. I believe I've overcome it. I try to live with my trauma, and I believe that trauma is a part of all of us. It doesn't hurt, and it won't always hurt. I'm so glad to be back. I was able to get to work a little early on Monday, and I taught in the afternoon. Then, I took a bus to the capital to work, and then to my aunt's house. I'm so grateful that I was able to recover so quickly from this difficult time. I believe I've moved past it, and I'm trying to live with my trauma. It's always with us, but it doesn't hurt us. The toughest periods in my life have been the bad times, but they don't affect me as much as this one. This happened in 2003, when I fell from the stairs. I got myself out of it, though, completely. In 2004, my mother passed away, and that was another hard time, but I was always very strong, and I was always able to get through things quickly, because I always had to move on. I've had some tough times, like when my daughter was born in 2003 and I had to deal with some personal stuff. But I've always been pretty strong, and I was able to bounce back quickly. I've been working since I was 14, so I've been through a lot. In 2007, I met my daughter's father, and we got married in 2010. In 2012, I had my daughter, who's now 10. She'll be 11 this year, and she's my world. I've been working since I was 14, and I've been doing so since I was very young. I met my daughter's father in 2007, and we got married in 2010. In 2012, I had my daughter, who is now 10. She will be 11 this year, and my daughter is my life. Everything in my life revolves around her. I'm so grateful that she's such a bright, friendly child. She brings me so much joy. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's such a special love, the kind of love a mother shares with her son, and it's beyond words. I've got a wonderful boyfriend, and he wants me to stop working. It's so important to be able to talk to her about this. My daughter is such a blessing. She's smart, friendly, and brings so much joy to my life. I don't even know how to express it. It's a love like no other, a love between a mother and son that's truly immeasurable. I recently got a rich boyfriend, who wants me to stop working. It's so important to consider what you'll say to her, especially because I've seen so many cases of women who've tried to separate, or endure a violent, abusive partner. The financial situation of the husband and the children, as well as the husband's ability to provide for them, play a big role. A woman's financial independence is really important, so she can get together with someone even if the relationship isn't good and doesn't work out. I'm so grateful that my case is different. I've seen so many women who've had to deal with situations where their husbands were violent and abusive. It really depends on the husband's financial situation, the kids, and the financial situation of the husband. It's really important that the man looks good. If a woman is financially independent, she can get together with someone even if the relationship isn't good. It doesn't work out, and you end up playing your life. I'm so thankful that I had my support system. I had my ego, and my family was also very important. We had the support of our family, and I always had an emotionally structured family. People didn't have a lot of money, but my parents and my father were private sector workers, and my mother was also employed by a private company. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't miserable. We weren't living in luxury, but we were emotionally supported by a close-knit family. I had a lot of support from my family, and we always loved each other. Unfortunately, my mother passed away in 2004, but I still have a great relationship with my father. I'm very grateful to God and my parents for raising me to be independent. I went to college, did a postgraduate program, and then finished with 3 more postgraduate programs. I think it's extreme, but I'm so thankful for the emotional support I received from my family. I may not have lived in luxury, but I always had a loving family. We always supported each other, and my brothers and I were very close. Unfortunately, my mother passed away in 2004, but I still have a great relationship with my father, and I'm very grateful to God and my parents for raising me to be independent. I went to college, did 3 postgraduate programs, and finally finished my studies. I think it's very important for women to study and work to support themselves. You should never lose yourself to a man, because it's not worth it. I want to give my younger sisters some advice. Don't leave your life to illusions, like having a fancy car, or thinking you have to give something to a man, because it always ends with a charge. It's so important for women to be independent and self-sufficient. I want to reassure you that you're not alone in this. When I was your age, I was studying and working to support myself. I had to learn the hard way that it's not worth getting caught up in illusions. It's not worth losing yourself to a guy with an imported car, or thinking you have to give something back. It always ends with you feeling used. My ex actually held me hostage. I was practically a hostage of him. He locked me in my house, left me without a phone, and even locked me out of my own home. I felt like Rapunzel in the tower without stairs, waiting for the prince to come and save me. But there's no one to fight for you. You have to fight for yourself.